Ainsley from A Mama with Trauma. A lot has gone on. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about a topic that I've dealt with since I was 12 years old, and that is of hypothyroidism. It means I have like a very, very, very underactive thyroid. For those of you who might not know anything about the thyroid, it's basically this butterfly-shaped gland in your throat that is almost like the nervous system, or like the command central for all the hormones in a person's body. And let me tell you from personal experience, when that thing goes, everything is affected. There are people who do have hyperthyroidism, and that's a whole different thing. I cannot speak to that. I know nothing of that. But I am going to talk to my personal experience on my journey with hypothyroidism. I am not a professional. This is my takeaway, my journey, what I have noticed and done, and all that kind of stuff. So please just take this information with a grain of salt. I'm sending this out there purely for just to hear it, to say it, to acknowledge it. Also, the disclaimer with all my videos is that the things that I am saying on here, I seek no ill will or vengeance or harm or anything towards the people who have caused me harm or trauma or anything like that. That's not what this page is for. I do not care about those people. Like, they're there, and that's I don't care. So I just say this stuff to maybe connect with people who might struggle with this. Maybe people don't want to feel so alone in their process, and sometimes just basically want to hear another person's point of view. I don't know, but okay. With that being said, hypothyroidism. So I guess the reason I am bringing this topic up, because I'm dealing with it right now. I'm in the midst of dealing with 2 doctors and my thyroid. I was tested when I was 12 years old. I was tested for hypothyroidism, and that being mainly because my mother had hypothyroidism and my father had hypothyroidism. And that's apparently not very common. And so I was tested and my brother was tested. The doctor, this was like a 90... No, like maybe 97, 98 when this was happening. So, little children really weren't thought of as individuals, really. They just kind of, doing what the parents told you to do. So, and again, the type of person my mom was, I was a possession. So just a possession to how to care for this possession, basically. There was not a whole lot of empathy that went into this process. There was not a lot of patience. There was not a lot of tenderness and care. There was very little of any of that, actually. It was just fact, just, okay, doctor, this is what you recommend. Check, we'll do this, and then send us on our merry way. There was never any, like, what does this child need? This is a really big thing. I didn't have any support at all. And I became responsible for taking my medication at the age of 12. And my mom told me so. She's like, you're responsible for this. I don't know about you, but what 12-year-old is responsible like that to take medication? Not many. Not many. That was a huge burden. That was a very, very huge burden put on me. I'm sorry. I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed at 12, and my thyroid was basically very underactive, borderline not even working. Like, it wasn't even doing anything. And mind you, I was 12 and I hadn't started my period. So, like, my body was just gearing up for my hormones to start, like, moving and shaking and really, slowly figuring itself out. And I was thrown on this very high dose of medication, and there was a lot of things that happened in a very short amount of time with this. So, like, there was my thyroid, there was my period started. I was having a lot of issues with, like, my brain and thinking and holding information. And so even within like this year, I got tested very rigorously for mental issues, and I was diagnosed then at the age of probably 13 with dyslexia. And I don't even now I don't even know if that's really truly what I have. I think I'm learning more, leaning more towards something else. But that's a different video. I got to break this stuff down. But it's very interesting to see how everything is kind of interconnected with the human body, and how doctors just love to split things up. They truly love to split things up, and how as an individual it takes so much work to keep things like whole as a whole. And like, I'm a whole person and I have a whole life, and when you start messing with one thing, it affects me in a whole myriad of ways. So anyways, so I was put on this medication, and it was my responsibility to take this. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't take the medication religiously because I was so young. And at one point, my mom found out that I wasn't really taking it because I was constantly being abused. My brain was so exhausted from trying to be hypervigilant on trying to navigate my mom's volatile emotions. I had no outside support. My dad was like, he didn't even care. Like, I wasn't even on the scale, like, with him. Like, it was very much like the son with the dad and the daughter with the mom type of thing. And my mom was absolutely crazy and didn't really care about me when I was home with her. So it just, there's so much, like, the burden was just so heavy. But when she found out that I wasn't taking it, I never forget this. Like, she called me, she was laying down in her bed, and she called me in there, and she starts screaming at me. Like, you're going to effing die. You are such a little bee. Why don't you take your medication? Like, this is, I got no reference to kindness, so, but this is how she chose to handle this situation. And so I curled in within myself and died even more, and beat myself down even more. Like, okay, you have to remember to take this. You have to remember to take it. Like, your life depends on it, quite literally. And just tried to figure out how to make myself remember how to be accountable. I was always being held accountable for everything. And that's brutal. And even saying that out loud, like, I just want to cry, because that's just, like, so exhausting. It's so exhausting. But that's, I will deal with this. I will talk with my therapist about this. But, so around, I would say 18, 19, I finally figured out how to force myself to remember to take this medication. And mind you, the instructions for this medication were not easy. the instructions for the medication are always as follows. It's you take this an hour before you eat on an empty stomach with water. And I mean, like, when it really started kicking in, like, I was in high school. And I don't know about you, but being in high school, I wasn't really one to want to, like, be that organized. I was never really that organized, and it was so much pressure to, like, follow these instructions because I was told that that was my responsibility. Follow these instructions. So there were, like, almost most of the time I would go to school and I hadn't eaten, and I also wouldn't take a lunch because I didn't know how to make a lunch, and hot lunch wasn't a thing. So I would literally go all day without eating or drinking, and it just became this horrific cycle. I get home and I was so, like, my head was splitting. I was so hungry. I would just eat really poorly and start the whole thing over the next day. And so food issues started from this. Gosh. So fast forward to last year in December, and doing my therapy and being in a safe space now away from the family and wanting to, like, get some control over my own life. I started having this thought of, like, what if you stepped away from your medication? What if you stepped away from it just to see how your body actually, what your body actually is naturally doing? And so I slowly, because I was on a very high dosage, and I stepped away from the dosage gradually because, again, this is a hormone based issue, and your hormones affect your thoughts, they affect your speech, they affect your body temperature, they affect your weight, they affect every part of you that you really can imagine. And when you start messing with that, it's a slow process, but it is a noticeable process. And so moods change and behaviors shift, and you can't really explain it to people because unless they've been through it, they're not going to really get it. And so just, like, a lot of suffering and silence, I guess, is what it kind of boiled down to, and just grinning and bearing it and getting through it. And finally got off of it completely, and I've been off of it for 3 months. And I would say about 8 weeks ago, I was tested. My doctor tested me, and I told her, I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing, because I need to know for myself. I was told at this age to do this, and there's so much trauma involved in this stuff, and I'm trying to just get a handle of it for myself. And she was, she's kind of alarmed because the side effects to hypothyroidism are pretty significant. Like, their brain memory and brain damage is actually some of the side effects to having go if you go too long without medication and hypothyroidism. And so, like, I can understand among many other things, skin issues, like digestive issues, balance issues. Like, they're just so many things. And, doing this and then going through what I've been going through with having a kid and trying to balance that, trying to deal with my trauma and go to therapy, and then my relationship with my husband and, like, the undoing of that. And it's a lot, and I don't really have a huge support system to help me shoulder this, or people who really I don't even know. Like people who would just genuinely to care. I don't even know if that makes sense, but it's just a lot to explain, and I guess that's why I'm making this video, so I can go back and confirm this. So I decided to get off the medication, and she tested my blood, and she was like, this is pretty low. And I'm like, yeah, but I feel good. For the first time, I'm recognizing like some of the things that I've been feeling for most of my life are like dissipating, like anxiety, sleeping really bad. Like I couldn't tell you the last time I slept well, like 8 hours of peaceful sleep. I could not tell you. Like sleep that's a whole nother thing. And after getting off of this medication, I noticed myself like really being able to sleep peacefully. And I'm like, I've never had this. And this is great. So she was like, okay, well, I mean, let's check it again in another 8 weeks. So this 8 weeks was, so the first time she checked it was in January, and now we're in March, and she just checked it, and we got the numbers back, and it's changed even more. And she's like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, and again, it's so wild that this is my trauma, because I'm so used to just being like accepting of what my body is doing, and I'm just like, I feel good, like I feel good. I'm a little cold, and my skin's changing, but overall I feel really good. I feel like I'm able to hear myself a lot more, and I don't know, just like there's something about being in this spot that feels very honest and truthful. It might not be great, but I feel very connected to the lowness of this thyroid. She's like, okay, well, we'll draw your blood and we'll look at it, and got that blood work back, and it's pretty dang low. It's really low. And she was telling me, sometimes the things that happen are like, I listed some of the symptoms, and I was like, yeah, I'm not opposed to getting back on medication, but I just, I gotta figure this out. I gotta figure it out. And she has been such an amazing doctor. She is very patient with me. And she just kind of, I mean, I know the urgency, but I also recognize in my own body, like, I have to come to terms with this. I have to come to terms with this on my own time. You telling me, hey, get on this medication with a sense of urgency doesn't help me really genuinely connect to what I'm feeling. And I do need to feel that. I do need to connect with this. But because of a situation with my insurance or whatever, I had to go to a different doctor, and I started talking to this new doctor, and I told him this was literally yesterday. I told him what was going on, and I told him about my thyroid and how low it was, and he was very emphatic about like, well, you need to be back on the medication. You need to be back on the medication. And in that, I was like, part of me was just very like, I hear what you're saying. I really do. And I'm not saying I'm not going to get on the medication, but I really have to understand this for myself. Like, I have to understand this. And like, he's like, I could tell, like, with his tone and his body language and everything, like, he was just trying so hard to, like, impart on me the importance of this. And at one point, I felt like I was just in this space of, like, what's happening? I feel like I'm in the past and in the present. I wasn't, like, there, but I'm here, and it was just really crazy. And I recognize, I'm like, wow, I have a really strong emotions regarding this conversation with this doctor. Like, I feel really, like, scared and afraid, and like I recognize that in myself, and I'm like, I feel really protective, and uh it was just, I don't know, it was just such a weird sensation and feeling. And in that, I was like, I heard him finally, and he's like, and he genuinely like got down on my levels, like, I'm just saying these things because I care about your safety. And I looked at him and I was just like, okay, I hear what you're saying, and let's just, I got you. Let's just do the blood work and see where this goes from here. And he did the blood work and everything, and then I left. I sat in the car for at least 10 minutes because I was like, what just happened in that office for me? And I recognized like this whole thing with my thyroid and what I'm feeling, and my present situation of trying to like get out of this relationship with my husband, and like just the trauma that I've been carrying. Like, I could not hear that this doctor's concern, genuine concern for my care and safety. And in that, I was like, I am not in a good way. I have gone for a very long time without knowing how to really trust even doctors. And look, that's not what this is about trusting doctors and whatever. My viewpoint on doctors is it's a business. I get that. I get that. That's not what this is about. But genuine, like a human being hearing how badly my thyroid is, and him being a professional and have understand the implications of hypothyroidism and what the dangers of that cause. Within that, like him genuinely being concerned about my health and my safety, and recognizing that I was fighting this doctor tooth and nail because I am so used to having to fight my battles and figure things out on my own. Like the vigilance of like having to protect myself and like go through something and make sure that it's okay for me is so high. It's so high. Like it was just, it was a wild experience to see that, and just the recognition of like how badly my trauma affects every aspect of my life in ways that I keep, like they just kind of keep popping up, and I'm like, dang, this stuff is so heavy. Look at, like, I'm recognizing like this, I've been operating in this space because of this, and the trauma that I had from dealing with this thyroid thing again, and now it coming up, and how it's making me emotional, so emotional. And it's just been very eye-opening. And for those of you who care, like the doctor did call me yet today after I looked at the lab work, and he's like, yeah, so did you see your labs? And I was like, yep, I did, and I knew they're pretty low. He's and in that he was like, okay, I want to get you on this medication at a certain amount. And I was like, hey, can we kind of start this slow? I haven't been on this in a while. And he's like, well, I'd like to start you at this amount. And I'm like, that's a little too high for me. I do need to, this is the amount I was on when I quit. And so I potentially would just like to start there. And he's like, okay, that's fine. Da, 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 da. And got off the phone. And then I just sat with that information and I was just like, no, this isn't even good for me. This is not even okay for me. Like, I recognize if I'm going to get, and learning this about myself, like recognizing if I'm about to get on this medication again, I have to do what's best for me and tell this doctor, I need this pace. This is my pace as a person, and I need to stay at this pace. Because going from nothing and then like getting on this medication, it's about to like do a number, because reintroducing hormones back into the body and rebooting my thyroid and the changes that are going to come on top of being a mom, navigating this whole situation with my relationship, working, like there are just so many things that are about to be affected, and I need to make sure that I can handle this change. And so I messaged him back and I was like, hey, I hear you wanting me to get on this medication, but this is the reality of me navigating this stuff. I was like, I need this to go slowly. I cannot just jump on to like a full amount, because it's going to wreak havoc on my body. And not even my body, like it's about to wreak havoc on me and then affect those around me. And I am trying to minimize that. And he really didn't care. He was just like, and I think that was very eye-opening for me. Like, fine, you want to go and take a smaller dosage and work up to, fine. He's like, just cut the pill in half and that's fine. And I think recognizing, for me, it was great to articulate my needs. Like, I'm caring for myself in a way that I don't think I've ever really cared for myself, and pay attention to my health. And that I'm glad that I called back and spoke up, because that made me feel good. Like, because nobody else is defending me. Nobody else is in my corner. And if I'm not going to start speaking out now, then that means I'm never going to speak up. So I guess if anyone's dealing with hypothyroidism and or the complexity of it, you're not alone. I recognize how difficult it is. It's such a difficult diagnosis to work with, and it affects so much. Oh my gosh, it affects so much in a human, and you can't even really articulate it. Like, it's so complex. Sometimes you just can't articulate it. Everyone can chalk it up to like, you're just in a bad mood or whatever, and it's like, it's so much more than just being in a bad mood. It's so much more than that. It's so deep, and it's so complex, and it just affects everything. It just affects everything across the board. And so that's all I got for today. I'll just be updating what happens in this aspect of my life, and if anyone is going through the same thing, or is thinking about stepping away from just trying to figure yourself out, like, trust yourself to figure out what works best for you. And I know medical professionals seem to think humans can't care for themselves, and I'm not saying that there aren't people out there who can't, but like, I know myself so well, and like, saying that, like, I know myself, so this is what I need. But yeah, I am Ainsley from A Mama with Trauma, and thanks for coming to my page. Have a good one.